Just a month ago, the one of the last three passed.
Such worries drove her up a war.
Now her face was sallow and ruined like the wilted blossom.
It took more than 70 years for her to write that down.
Some tea?
No, thank you, darling. Yes.
How are you doing? Busy these days?
Very busy with the Biennale, but I'm thinking to feature this graphic novel called
Graphic
Grass.
novel. What is it like, graphic novel? It's like comic?
It's not like it's like a comic book, but it's longer, as you can see, and it's about a very serious topic. So it's about comfort women.
Ah, comfort woman.
A serious thing.
This day I encountered about the subject of comfort woman in different medium, like children's book and documentary. And the book we will read with you today is also about comfort woman.
Oh, perfect. It's called One Left. It sounds like a mystery novel.
Colin, it's great to see you.
Great to see you. Been a long time.
Yes. What have you been up to these days?
A lot of writing and reading as well.
Yeah.
This novel was my latest, One Left by Kim Soom. Have you heard of it?
I've heard of it. I haven't had a chance to read it myself, and so
Well,
I'd
have
be
you
curious to hear your thoughts.
픽션과 non-픽션은 말 그대로 이제 어떤 사건을 다루는 방식에 있어서 차이가 있죠. 조금 더 사료나 어떤 그 인물 혹은 역사적 사실의 중심을 두고 그것을 맞추는 것이 non-픽션이라고 한다면 이 작품은 소설이란 방식으로 쓰였고요. 많은 사람들의 인생과 그들의 어떤 생각들을 한 사람의 입에서 한 사람의 가치와 한 사람의 어떤 그 염원으로 번역하고 그 사람 입에서 구현시키고 있는 그러한 방식이 이 한 명이라고 하는 작품이 가지고 있는 픽션적 가치, 소설적 가치라고 할 수 있을 것입니다.
What do you know about the writer? Were you familiar with her before?
Kim Soom, I've done a translation workshop with her, and she's a very imaginative writer, which is interesting because in her previous novels, she creates worlds, she creates different realities. But here, she's telling a real story, and she's crafting it out of the actual testimony given by real comfort women who, as girls, were really taken by the Japanese military during the war. So this is a departure for her. It's, in a way, a work of history as much as it is a work of fiction from this novelist who was, her previous works could get quite imaginative. She would depart quite far from reality. Now she stays as close as possible to it.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense because it is such a controversial issue. And so if you present a story about comfort women, then you don't want to give the impression that you invented all of these stories. You want to ground it in reality.
You do, and this book even includes footnotes, like an actual historical paper. So if you want, you can hear these harrowing moments, you can read about these painful memories this character has. But if you follow the number and you turn to the back page, you can actually see, you can look up which comfort woman gave that testimony of that real experience. Of course, some readers will find that a little bit too painful, but they'll at least know that it was based on something it was a memory someone really had.
So tell me a little bit more about this main character.
Well, I need the glasses. Check it. One left. Now there's only one left. Yesterday there were two, but one of them passed away overnight. She hears this from the television and she's folding her blanket and her fingers go numb. Wasn't it just a month ago that one of the last 3 passed? Setting the folded blanket aside, she wipes the floor with her hand and gathers the dust and the bits of threads and flakes of skin and strands of gray hair into a tiny ball. And then there's me, she mutters. That's really the last one.
Her name is Pungil, but it's not a name that anybody speaks in the novel. She's in this neighborhood that is about to be redeveloped. And you know these neighborhoods in Seoul, when they get a little old, the buildings get decrepit, the owners want to sell, and a new neighborhood gets built. Well, she's one of the last holdouts in this neighborhood. And when she hears the announcement of the death of another comfort woman, this triggers the memory.
Yeah, I mean, it's a common thing for novels to have these kind of flashbacks where the main character is visited by these memories, but in this case, the memories must be so traumatic.
Her flashback, like 8 years ago, when she was collecting snails near her village for food, and she was kidnapped by this unknown man.
She was kidnapped, like stolen, and where was she taken? What's the story?
Well, she didn't know where and why she was taken, and she was just dumped in the truck and taken to the train station. And she meets other girls like her, and they were loaded on the train. This is a place where you take soldiers, so you have to take the soldiers. They told me I'd be a nurse. I didn't come here to take soldiers, said the girl with the buck teeth. We will take good care of you if you sacrifice yourself for Imperial Japan. They said they'd find me a nice place to work here, said the girl with the round eyes. That's news to me, said Haha with a straight face. Why are you lying to us, said the girl who had shared her rice cake, earning her a slap in the face from Haha. Whimpering and whining, another girl asked to be taken home. Not until she paid back all the money they'd spent to bring her here to Manchuria, said Haha. No girl would go home until she paid off her debt. She herself wanted to tell Haha she'd been taken away while she was outside looking for snails, but she was too frightened to open her mouth. Those girls who didn't know what they were doing, age of our kids, had to do all those terrible sexual abuse, and it's really...
Right, so and these were like underage kids, so they were...
Like 13.
She was 13.
Yeah. All the other girl was like those age.
Right, that's incredible. Right? So that is a horrible graphic story. And this was during the Japanese occupation.
Yeah, it was a colonial time. So some of the girls thought they were going to work in the factory to make earnings and maybe to send their home. When they arrive in Manchuria, they find out it was comfort station. There was no factory, but only soldiers, and they realize what is their job to do.
Recently, there's been an academic article by a legal scholar, a professor.
J. Mark Ramsire, I think is his name,
Yes.
at Harvard.
At Harvard Law School, yes.
Professor Mark Ramsire of Harvard Law School has faced strong public outrage and criticism over his recent academic article on Korean comfort women.
미국 하버드대 로스쿨 교수가 일본군 위안부 피해자를 자발적 매춘부로 규정한
마크 램지어 하버드대 로스쿨 교수가
마크 램지어 하버드대 교수의 논문을
램지어 하버드대 교수의 위안부 논문을
He was claiming in this article that there were contracts that existed that Korean women signed when they joined these comfort stations.
So that's his main contention, is that these comfort women were not kidnapped in the main, were not forced into this work in the main. They were strategically entering into it in a sense, it's almost economically that calculated it would be to their benefit. Of course, it was wartime, and he makes allowances for the things people do in wartime, the desperation of these situations, but at the same time, he emphasizes that it was voluntary, when in this novel, One Left, it could hardly seem less voluntary.
Right.
Even this contract existed. Do you think it can be justified, all this abuse and kidnapping, even murdering?
Yeah, of course. And also the girls were underage, so if they had to sign a contract, they were
human traffic in that time. So in the comfort station, those girls was really abused. Like the girl who didn't satisfy the soldiers would get tortured in their private parts. And they frequently got arson 606 shots to prevent their venereal disease. And when they got pregnant, they take their uterus away with their while they are doing abortion.
So it's very, very terrible torture on every level.
Yeah. And they also shot up in opium, and many of them were also addicted.
And how does that make you feel to read about this thing?
Especially as a Korean woman, it was very difficult to digest the subject.
Because being Italian, I heard about this, but we don't have so much detail. So we know about the horrors of war, so in case of camps and people starving, but this is systematic. So the scary thing is that it was
organized.
Yeah. Could they actually escape sometime? They could escape from the camp?
It was almost impossible. She's witnessed her friend was escaping, but then caught and killed. Right. But also she later attempts to escape.
Shall we hear a bit more of their translation?
Okay.
When there was a battle, the soldiers didn't come. And if only the soldiers never returned from battle. The soldiers who did return seemed to be in a frenzy. They were so giddy and violent. So what, the soldiers retorted, they might die in battle today or tomorrow, so why worry about a stupid disease? And then they would pounce. What if I come down with gonorrhea or syphilis? Such worries drove her up a wall.
One of them, a slightly built youth in a man-sized uniform, clutched her arm as he might have that of the big sister and sniffled. The mere sight of the Japanese military uniform made her want to throw up. But she soothed him nonetheless. Come on now, don't cry, and just make sure you come back alive. Even though she wished that none of the Japanese soldiers would come back alive. This soldier, crying like a child, captured her sympathies. They felt sympathy.
And this happens when you're a prisoner, that sometimes you feel for any gentleness becomes a sign of empathy.
Yeah.
Kim Soom, she also shows, in a way, how differently hellish a situation the members of the Japanese army are in. Of course, they're the ones committing much of the violence in this book, but she gives glimpses of how they themselves have also been committed violence upon by their own government. They too are young. They too feel the future has been taken away from them. And they too are, of course, victims of violence.
Eventually, Japan was defeated, so Korea was liberated. What happened to these girls?
Well, I read that when Japan retreated, they had to get rid of some evidence. So some of them were massacred, and some of them just left over.
And they were left on their own. So I can imagine how many comfort women there were.
Actually, there were not only Koreans, but also the other nations like Chinese and Dutch. And all together were like 200,000 comfort women. And only 20,000 girls returned their home after the war.
So just 1 out of 10 could survive,
Yeah.
and then they returned to Korea. And could they have a normal life once they got back?
Yeah, but some of them maybe had their family, but some of girl tried to have baby, and she couldn't, so she goes to Mudang to get pregnant and all those things. But In the end, she found out her uteruses were taken from the abortion in the station. Some of also had the baby, but had another complication later when they grow up through the venereal disease.
So this being kidnapped and taken away in the end continue all her life, parting the memories of the smell and everything, and then also not being able to be accepted.
Due to the trauma they experienced, they lived in shame, and most of all they couldn't release it, I think. So that was really... You can imagine her life when she finally get back her home. You can read.
Right, yeah, of course.
The tale of Pungi getting back to Korea is in itself also harrowing, the word I used to describe the book. She takes her time, takes years to get back to Korea. When she gets back to Korea, it's a Korea she doesn't really recognize, and that doesn't quite recognize her. Even family members don't know who she is.
Yeah. So this passage is from when she returns to Korea. Who are you? Came the question again. Disheartened, she plopped herself on the ground and wailed. Father, though clear in the head, did not recognize her. It had been a long time since he last saw her, and now her face was sallow and ruined like the wilted blossom of a rotten cucumber. As far as the family was concerned, she was dead. She fibbed that she had left home, but ended up by mistake in Busan, where she ended up working as a live-in maid. She dared not tell them about Manchuria. When dusk set in, she stole out to her mother's grave to bawl. She never went near the river, afraid she would find the little 13-year-old girl still gathering snails. Sister-in-law also mentioned that she had seen Kim Haksun on television weeping.
And did you know that in Japan they said that the woman in volunteer corps went off to practice a trade?
Volunteer corps? What trade?
Selling their body, you know that.
결심을 단단하게 했어요. 아니다, 이거는 바로 잡아야 한단 말이야. 저렇게 거짓말을 하는데 왜 거짓말을 하는지 모르겠단 말이야. 그래갖고 집에서 저주고 나오게 돼서 누가 나오라고 말한 것도 아니고 내 스스로 이제 내가 나이가 20 다 됐어. 이제는 이만 나이 먹고 이제 죽어도 괜찮아. 근데 나올 때 좀 무서웠어요. 그거도 항의했어요. 이제 하고 싶은 말을 내가 꼭 하고야 말 거예요. 언제든지 하고야 말 거니까.
Kim Haksun, one of the first, I believe the first comfort woman to make a public announcement of what had happened to her, when that revealed to the public what was going on in Manchuria during World War II, even then she kept it under wraps, she kept it to herself. Only at the time period of this book, when she's in her 90s, when the character has reached her 90s, does she consider that it's come time to reveal her past.
I mean, I can imagine how difficult that must be, to have kept this secret all your life and to have lived through such incredible trauma, to come out and speak about it publicly when you know that people might attack you or when you're not sure how your family will react. I'm sure it must have been a very difficult decision.
The key word is volunteer, after being kidnapped. And
Nobody would understand her life. She's not also there to tell anything to their family. She was really haunted in this horrible nightmare. When she smelled the rotting fish, she could smell the friend's dead body burning.
so it's like the memories are hunting you, even if you get out from the place, that until old age you keep going back into the place.
In the character of Pungi, we see various kinds of trauma all combined into one person. And Kim Soom tells the story of a resolution to, if not overcome the trauma, then at least to find a way to speak out and reveal what her past was, because it's still a secret when the book opens. No one but her knows what happened to her. But this is a story in a way of finding a way to take that trauma and bring it out into the world in a way that preserves historical memory.
Okay. And we should remember too, of course, that the comfort women were people of many different nationalities, not just Korean.
She opens the drawer to the television stand and takes out a folded sheet of paper. As she unfolds it, the words that are practically etched into the paper seem to jump out and compete for her attention. I'm a victim too. It took more than 70 years for her to write that down.
She's finally on her way. It's like the journey had been in the back of her mind her whole life. She herself assumed the last one lived in another city. And that's where the hospital is. Why didn't it occur to her that the last one might be living nearby?
Actually, good thing about this book, in the end, she opened her mouth. She got courage to go to meet this last comfort woman.
The last one.
Yeah.
The women who live through these experiences are getting quite elderly, and there are fewer and fewer. I mean, this book looks at a potential situation in the future. At some point, there will be one.
It's true. I think Kim Soom's trying to give that impression that this character, Pungil, hasn't thought deeply about this, because she couldn't think deeply about this until the death of another comfort woman made her confront, well, I have my set of memories. There's only two of us left in the world with this kind of memory, with the memory of these experiences. Someone has to keep these memories alive even after we both go. So she's confronted with mortality and with the loss of memory, not just of an individual's memory, but the historical memory that entails. We've all lived around women of that generation. You wonder what their story is. Some of them could have had a story like this. Kim Soom didn't know before she started researching that they were living near her. And just as well, we may not either. You know, anybody could be living near someone who has had an experience like this.
What would you do if your victim were in your family?
It's hard to say, because I think with the mind of today, and you feel anger. But I understand that in the condition of war, you are thinking about your own life, so you're living in constant fear.
I mean, as someone who had some background knowledge about this issue, what was your experience reading it?
Well, some of these details, you know, I think even if you know about the comfort women, you avoid thinking about certain details of what went on here. But Kim Soom, in her research, she doesn't shy away from anything. And it's a book that many will find troubling because of the amount of detail she provides about the treatment of the girls in these so-called comfort stations and the actual physical violence they would undergo. And it's difficult to overstate. You know, often there have been controversies about have comfort women exaggerated their stories, but I don't see how you could get any worse than some of the scenes in this book. They're hardly the kind of thing you'd want to talk about on TV. Yeah. But it's true to Kim Soom's mission. She wants to be as upfront and graphic, in a sense, about this, because who's going to remember if it's not written down as she heard it was? Because, of course, Kim Soom is a younger writer. Yeah. She's under 50 years old, I believe. So all of this to her is also received memory, but she's the novelist. She's the one who can give it that extra visceral impact that for the reader may not be comfortable. Yeah. But for a story like this, it perhaps has to be that way.
Yeah, I mean, books like this make me wonder how it would feel to have lived through something like this.
It does feel like a completely different reality, right? It's that level of violence and that level of chaos and disorder. Yeah, so you wonder what could this have been like?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think literature can do for us, is to help put us into the mind of someone who's lived through these experiences that we ourselves.
You should read it. That's why it's been translated in English.
우리가 살면서 재밌고 즐겁고 좋은 것의 의미, 항상 그것만 찾을 수는 없잖아요. 그리고 한명 같은 어떤 이야기들은 고통스럽고 슬프고 가슴 아픈 이야기들, 그리고 삶에서 어떤 그러한 부분들을 자기가 찾아서 의미 있게 본다라고 하는 것, 그게 조금 더 자기 삶을 좀 더 의미 있게 만드는 독서가 아닐까라고 생각이 듭니다.